The voice stopped sounding like Daniel the moment it correctly described the bone sticking out of his leg. Until then, we had almost convinced ourselves it was an animal. There were 6 of us at the campsite when the sun went down. By midnight, there were 5. Daniel had left just before 9 to find the toilet block near the northern trail. He took a headlamp, his jacket, and one of the handheld radios the ranger had loaned us at check-in. He never came back. At first, nobody panicked. Daniel was the kind of person who turned a 2-minute walk into an expedition. He would stop to examine animal tracks or take pictures of mushrooms. When 40 minutes passed, Marcus joked that he had probably found a bear and was trying to befriend it. At 50 minutes, we called his radio. Nothing. At 1 hour, we split into pairs and checked the trail. That was when we found his headlamp. It lay in the mud beside the path, still switched on. There was no blood around it, no footprints leaving the trail, just the lamp shining into the trees. We returned to camp and called the ranger station. Ranger Bell answered immediately. He told us to stay near the fire, keep the radios on, and not search beyond the marked paths. Then he asked a strange question. "Has anyone called to you from the woods?" Marcus laughed. Bell didn't. "I'm serious," he said. "Until I get there, do not answer anything you hear beyond the firelight." We thought he was warning us about getting separated, or maybe about people wandering around the forest. None of us believed he meant Daniel. The first time we heard him, the voice came from downhill. "Guys?" Every conversation stopped. It was faint, but unmistakable. "Daniel." "Marcus?" The voice sounded weak, far away. Marcus stood so quickly he knocked over his chair. "Daniel?" I grabbed his arm before he could shout again. The ranger had told us not to answer. Marcus pulled away. "That's him." From beyond the firelight, Daniel called again. "I fell." The words echoed between the trees. "My leg's broken." Sophie began crying. Marcus grabbed a flashlight. "We know where he is now." I reminded him about Bell's warning. Marcus stared at me like I'd lost my mind. "You want to leave him down there because a ranger said something weird?" Before I could answer, Daniel's voice came again. "There's a fallen cedar above me." We all looked toward the northern slope. There was only one fallen cedar near the ravine. We had passed it that afternoon. Daniel knew that. "It's him," Marcus said. The voice continued. "I can see the red trail marker." Sophie whispered, "There's a marker beside the ravine." Marcus switched on his flashlight. That was when the voice said something that made him stop. "My left leg is under me." Marcus turned toward us. Daniel had broken his left ankle 3 years earlier. It had never healed properly, and he always joked that it would be the first part of him to snap if he fell. The voice knew that. "I can't feel my foot," it said. Then, after a pause, the bone came through. Nobody moved. The detail was too specific to dismiss, too ugly to fake. Marcus looked at me. "If that's not him, how does it know?" We had no answer. The radio hissed. For 1 second, we thought it was Bell. Then Daniel's voice came through the speaker. "Please." Marcus lifted the radio. The voice in the trees and the voice through the radio spoke at the same time. "Come get me." Sophie covered her ears. Marcus answered, "Daniel, stay where you are." The woods went silent. Even the radio static disappeared. Ranger Bell had warned us not to answer. Marcus had answered anyway. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then the voice said, "Now I know which one is Marcus." Marcus lowered the radio. His expression changed. The voice no longer sounded injured. It sounded interested. Bell arrived 12 minutes later with 2 search volunteers. When we told him what had happened, he looked directly at Marcus. "You answered it?" Marcus tried to explain that the voice knew about Daniel's leg. Bell interrupted him. "It doesn't know anything until somebody confirms it. He ordered us into the ranger truck." Marcus refused. Daniel was still out there. Bell told him Daniel wasn't in the ravine. "You don't know that," Marcus said. Bell looked toward the trees. "I know what's down there doesn't have a broken leg." The search team checked the ravine anyway. They found the fallen cedar. They found the red marker. Below it, in the mud, they found a long depression shaped like someone had been lying there. But there was no blood, no torn clothing, no Daniel. When the volunteers climbed back up, one of them was carrying Daniel's radio. It had been placed carefully on a rock. The battery had been removed. Bell drove us to the station. Nobody spoke during the ride. At 1:43 in the morning, a call came over the dispatch channel. Another ranger unit had located Daniel. He had been found wandering beside a service road nearly 14 kilometers from our campsite. He was dehydrated and confused, but alive. Both of his legs were uninjured. Relief hit us so quickly that Sophie started laughing. Even Marcus smiled. Bell did not. He asked dispatch what time Daniel had been found. The reply came back, 22:48, 10:48 p.m., almost 2 hours before the voice began calling from the ravine. Daniel remembered leaving camp. He remembered seeing a light between the trees and following it because he thought it was the toilet block. After that, he remembered nothing until the rangers found him beside the road. At the hospital, Marcus asked him about the broken leg. Daniel stared at him. "What broken leg?" Marcus explained what the voice had said. Daniel went pale. He pulled up the left leg of his trousers. There was a dark bruise around his ankle. Not an injury. Finger marks. 5 of them. As though something had held his leg tightly while it learned where the bone would come through. We left the park the following morning. Marcus barely spoke. 3 nights later, he called me. He said someone was standing outside his apartment. I asked if he could see them. He said no. He could only hear a voice from the hallway. Daniel's voice. It kept saying Marcus's name. I told him not to answer. Marcus whispered that he already had. There was a long silence. Then another voice spoke into the phone. It sounded exactly like me. "Now I know which one you are." The call ended. Police found Marcus's apartment empty. The door was locked from the inside. His phone was lying on the kitchen floor. The final recording lasted 19 seconds. For the first 18, Marcus was breathing. In the last second, 2 voices whispered together. One belonged to Daniel. The other belonged to Marcus. Both said, "There are 5 of us at the campsite." Elena woke because her boyfriend was whispering their emergency phrase from outside the tent. The problem was that he was asleep beside her. The phrase was something they had invented after getting lost during a winter hike. 3 words, Follow my breathing. It meant one of them was injured, frightened, or unable to call out normally. They had never told anyone about it. They had never needed to use it. Until the second night at Lake Marrow. Elena and Josh had hiked into a backcountry campsite nearly 10 kilometers from the nearest road. There were no other tents around the lake, no cabins, no ranger station. Just a fire ring, a picnic table, and a trail that disappeared into thick pine forest. At 2:16 in the morning, Elena opened her eyes. At first, she didn't know what had woken her. Then she heard Josh whisper outside. Follow my breathing. She froze. Josh was lying beside her. She could feel the warmth of his shoulder against her arm. His breathing was slow and heavy. Outside, the whisper came again. Follow my breathing. Elena reached for Josh's face. She touched his cheek. He was real, warm, asleep. The voice outside moved closer. Not through footsteps, through direction. The first whisper had come from near the trees. The next came from beside the picnic table. The third came from directly beyond the tent wall. Follow my breathing. Elena shook Josh awake. He inhaled sharply. Before she could warn him, the voice outside whispered his name. Josh. He started to sit up. Elena covered his mouth. They listened. The nylon wall pressed inward slightly, as though something outside had placed a hand against it. Josh pointed to the knife near his backpack. Elena shook her head. They had one exit. Whatever was outside already knew where it was. Josh leaned close to her ear. Could be another camper. Elena whispered, using our phrase? He had no answer. Outside, the voice began breathing. Slowly. In, out. In, out. Josh's breathing matched it. Not approximately. Perfectly. Each inhale began at the same instant. Each exhale lasted the same length. Elena pressed her hand against Josh's chest. His lungs rose. The tent wall expanded. His lungs fell. The tent wall relaxed. Something outside was copying him. Josh held his breath. The breathing outside stopped. For 7 seconds, there was absolute silence. Then the voice whispered, "You always hold it for 7. Josh looked at Elena. He did. Whenever he tested how long he could hold his breath, he unconsciously counted to 7 before inhaling again. Elena knew that. Nobody else did. Josh reached for the zipper. Elena stopped him. "If it wanted to come in, it would," Josh whispered. "Maybe it can't." That explanation gave them temporary relief. The tent was a boundary. The voice could imitate him, but it couldn't cross the fabric. Then something tapped the wall behind them. They turned. A second tap came from the opposite side. Then a third from above. The voice had not moved around the tent. It was touching the tent from several directions at once. Josh picked up the knife. "We leave together, straight to the trail." Elena nodded. They put on their boots without speaking. Josh held the knife in one hand and the zipper in the other. Before he opened it, Elena heard a sound behind her. Josh whispering, "Follow my breathing." She turned. His eyes were open. His mouth was closed. The whisper came again, this time from inside his chest. "Follow my breathing." Josh grabbed his throat, his expression filled with confusion. Then his mouth opened. The voice outside opened with it. Both spoke at once. "Don't let me out." Josh dropped the knife. Elena backed away until she hit the tent wall. He looked terrified. "Elena, I didn't say that." His real voice sounded normal, human. Outside, the copied voice began sobbing. "I didn't say that." Josh covered his ears. The sobbing repeated his words half a second after he spoke them. "I didn't say that. I didn't say that. I didn't say that." Elena realized it was no longer copying his voice. It was practicing timing. Each repetition came faster, half a second late, then a quarter, then almost simultaneous. Josh whispered, "We need to run before it gets it right." They opened the tent. Nothing stood outside. The campsite was empty. The fire had gone cold. The forest around them was motionless. They ran toward the trail. After 20 meters, Josh stopped. Their tent was ahead of them. Same color, same campsite, same cold fire. They turned around. The original tent was still behind them. Two identical campsites sat on opposite sides of the trail. Elena tried to rationalize it. Darkness, panic, disorientation. They had somehow circled back. Then a zipper opened on the second tent. A woman stepped out. Elena saw herself. The other Elena looked exhausted. Her clothes were torn. There was blood on her hands. She stared at Josh, then at Elena. "You opened it," she said. Josh raised the knife. The other Elena ignored him. She pointed at the tent they had just left. "You're not supposed to leave until it chooses which voice belongs outside." Elena demanded to know who she was. The other woman gave a broken laugh. "I asked the same thing." From inside the second tent, Josh's voice whispered, "Follow my breathing." The Josh beside Elena went rigid. The second Josh crawled out. His throat had been cut. He looked at Elena and tried to speak. Only air came out. The living Josh stepped backward. The injured one pointed at him frantically. Then he pointed to his own chest. The whisper came from both of them. "Follow my breathing." Elena ran. She did not wait to see which Josh followed. She kept to the trail until sunrise. At 7:30, two hikers found her near the main road. She told them Josh was still at the lake. A rescue team reached the campsite before noon. They found one tent, one set of footprints leading in, one set leading out. Josh was inside his sleeping bag, alive, uninjured. He claimed Elena had woken him during the night, opened the tent, and walked into the forest without saying anything. He followed her but lost sight of her near the trail. He had returned to the tent and waited for daylight. The rescuers believed him. Elena almost did too. Panic could distort memory. Exhaustion could create impossible images. She began to think the second campsite had been a hallucination. Then Josh visited her at the hospital. He sat beside her bed and held her hand. He apologized for not finding her. For a moment, she felt safe. Then he leaned close and whispered, "Follow my breathing." Elena pulled away. Josh looked confused. "What?" She asked why he had said it. He insisted he hadn't. Then his chest rose. Elena heard another inhale beneath it, a quieter one, slightly late. His chest fell. The second breath followed. It was still copying him, still practicing. Elena stared at him until Josh became uncomfortable. Then both voices spoke. This time the delay was gone. "Elena?" She never saw him again. She changed her number, moved cities, and refused to tell anyone where she lived. 6 months later, a voicemail appeared on her new phone. There was no incoming call, no number. The recording contained only breathing. At first, she thought it was Josh. Then she recognized the rhythm. It was hers. The recording had been made while she was listening to it. At the end, her own voice whispered, "It chose which one belongs outside." Behind the voice, a zipper began to open. The voice knew the name of the imaginary friend Thomas had buried with his son. Evan had disappeared at 4:20 in the afternoon. By sunset, the search teams had found one of his shoes beside the river. By midnight, every parent in the campground had joined the search. Thomas remained near the family tent because the sheriff believed Evan might return on his own. Evan was 8. He was cautious around strangers. He hated deep water. He had never wandered farther than the toilet block without permission. At 12:37, Thomas heard him crying beyond the trees. "Dad?" Thomas ran toward the voice. A deputy caught him before he crossed the search perimeter. "Evan!" The crying stopped. The deputy held Thomas by both arms. "We've already searched that section. He's there." Sound carries strangely near the river. Then the voice called again. "Dad, please answer me." The deputy's grip tightened. Thomas shouted Evan's name. The deputy pulled him back. "Don't." Thomas stared at him. The deputy looked embarrassed, as though he regretted reacting. He said the search team had been instructed not to answer voices from outside visual range. Thomas demanded to know why. The deputy said it was standard procedure to prevent searchers from becoming separated. That sounded reasonable. For the next hour, Thomas stayed beside the fire. The voice called every few minutes, sometimes from the river, sometimes from the hillside. Once from directly behind the toilet block. It always sounded like Evan, but it never repeated the same plea. "Dad, my feet are cold. Dad, there's somebody near me. Dad, I can't see the lights." Each sentence created an image Thomas could not escape. His son alone, barefoot, watching strangers search in the wrong place. Thomas begged the deputies to follow the voice. They did, every time. They found nothing. At 1:52, the sheriff ordered everyone back to camp. The river had risen. Visibility was getting worse. Continuing the search in darkness would endanger more people. Thomas accused them of giving up. The sheriff said they would resume at first light. Then Evan's voice called from the trees. "Dad, tell them about Captain Hollow." Thomas stopped breathing. Nobody else reacted. The sheriff asked what it meant. Thomas didn't answer. Captain Hollow was the name Evan had given his imaginary friend when he was 4. Evan claimed Captain Hollow lived in empty places. Closets, storm drains, the gap beneath his bed. Thomas and his wife had treated it like a game until Evan began waking with scratches on his arms. A child psychologist told them imaginary companions were normal. Evan eventually stopped talking about Captain Hollow. One afternoon, he asked Thomas to help him bury the friend so it could not come back. They put an empty shoebox beneath the apple tree in their backyard. Evan made Thomas promise never to tell anyone, not even his mother. The voice in the forest knew. "Dad," it called, "you buried him facing the wrong way." Thomas began walking toward the trees. The sheriff blocked him. Thomas struck him. It took 3 people to restrain him. The voice began crying, Not loudly, disappointedly.
"Dad, you promised."
Thomas screamed for Evan to keep talking. The sheriff covered his mouth. The voice stopped. For several minutes, Thomas fought against the hands holding him. Then the radio crackled. A search volunteer had found footprints near the East Ridge, child-sized, barefoot. The tracks led uphill toward an abandoned fire lookout. The sheriff organized a team. Thomas insisted on going. This time, they let him. The trail climbed for nearly 3 kilometers. Along the way, the voice continued calling, always farther ahead. It revealed one memory after another. The time Evan broke a lamp and blamed the dog. The song Thomas sang when Evan had pneumonia. The sentence Evan whispered at his mother's funeral. Things no stranger could know. With every detail, Thomas became more certain. It was his son. The deputies became less certain. One suggested Evan might have been abducted by someone who knew the family. Another believed a person near the campsite had overheard private conversations. The sheriff said nothing. At 3:15, they reached the fire lookout. The door was locked from the inside. Evan's voice came from within. "Dad?" Thomas rushed to the window. The glass was too dirty to see through. He pressed his face against it. A small hand touched the other side. Thomas began crying. "I'm here." The hand remained against the glass. "Answer me properly," Evan said. Thomas asked what he meant. The voice repeated, "Answer me properly." The sheriff ordered everyone away from the building. Thomas refused. His son was inside. The sheriff asked him to notice something. The hand against the window had 6 fingers. Thomas stared. For several seconds, his mind refused to understand what he was seeing. Then the hand slid downward and vanished. The voice inside began laughing. It was Evan's laugh. The exact, breathless laugh he made when he was trying not to be heard. Thomas stepped back. Temporary relief came with the realization that it wasn't Evan. Then the voice said, "Dad, Captain Hollow had 6 fingers too." Thomas had never seen Captain Hollow. Evan had never described him. But after the shoebox burial, Thomas had found a drawing beneath Evan's bed. A tall figure standing in an empty doorway, 6 fingers on each hand. Thomas had burned it before anyone else saw. The sheriff ordered the door forced open. 2 deputies used a steel ram. On the 3rd strike, the lock broke. The lookout was empty. Dust covered the floor. There were no footprints inside, no hiding place, no second exit. On the far wall, someone had scratched a sentence into the wood. "He answers when you remember him." Thomas denied knowing what it meant. Then he saw the corner. An old shoebox sat beneath the window. The same blue cardboard, the same faded sailing ship printed on the lid. The box they had buried beneath the apple tree. Thomas opened it. Inside was one of Evan's baby teeth, a strip of his mother's funeral dress, and a folded piece of paper. The paper contained a child's handwriting. "Dad said you weren't real, so I showed you where he sleeps." The voice spoke behind Thomas, not from the room, from the radio clipped to the sheriff's chest. "Dad?" Everyone froze. "I found Evan." Thomas grabbed the radio. "Where?" The sheriff tried to stop him. Too late. Thomas had answered. The voice whispered, Now I know which one is his father. Every radio on the mountain switched off. At dawn, search crews found Evan. He was asleep beneath a picnic table less than 100 meters from the original campsite. He was cold but unharmed. He had no memory of leaving the tent. Thomas held him for almost an hour. Evan seemed normal. He recognized everyone. He remembered his birthday, his school, his mother's funeral. The doctors found no injuries. For the first time since the disappearance, Thomas felt relief. Then Evan asked a question. Did he find the box? Thomas looked at him. Evan's expression remained calm.
What box?
The one we buried. Thomas told him not to worry about it. Evan nodded. Then he held up his right hand. He had 5 fingers. He held up his left. 5 again. Thomas almost laughed at his own fear. Then Evan whispered, "He doesn't need 6 when he's wearing me." Thomas called for the doctors. Evan began screaming. He screamed that he had not said anything. He begged Thomas not to let them take him away. The doctors sedated him. Every test came back normal. Evan returned home 2 days later. For several weeks, nothing happened. Thomas began sleeping again. He convinced himself that trauma had distorted what he heard. The lookout, the box, the voice, all of it had happened under exhaustion and grief. Then, one morning, he found dirt on Evan's bedroom floor.
A thin trail led from the window to the closet. Thomas opened the closet. Nobody was inside. At the back, behind Evan's clothes, the wall had been covered in drawings. Dozens of them. Every picture showed Thomas asleep. Some were drawn from the doorway, some from beneath the bed, some from the ceiling. In every picture, a child stood beside him. Thomas assumed it was Evan. Then he counted the fingers. 6. The final drawing showed the campground, the river, the searchlights. Thomas sitting beside the fire, while a small figure watched from the trees. Beneath it, Evan had written, "He didn't take me. He needed you to miss me." Thomas heard his son call from downstairs. "Dad?" He did not answer. The voice came again. "Dad, I made breakfast." Thomas remained silent. Footsteps crossed the kitchen, started up the stairs, stopped outside the bedroom.
Dad?
Thomas covered his mouth. The door handle slowly turned. Then his phone rang. The sheriff's number appeared on the screen. Thomas answered without speaking. The sheriff sounded terrified.
He said investigators had returned to the fire lookout. They had removed part of the wall containing the scratched message. Behind it, they found a ranger incident log from 1978. A boy had disappeared from the same campground. His father reported hearing him call from the forest. The boy was later found unharmed. The father vanished 3 weeks afterward. Thomas asked why the sheriff was telling him this now. The sheriff said the old report contained a handwritten note, a warning from the missing father. What did it say?
The sheriff hesitated. Outside the bedroom, Evan's voice whispered, "Don't." The sheriff read the note. "The voice does not take the missing child." The bedroom door opened. Evan stood in the hallway, smiling. The sheriff finished. "It uses the child to learn which voice the parent will always answer." Thomas looked at his son. Evan's mouth did not move, but the sheriff's voice came from inside him. "Thomas, are you still there?" Thomas did not respond. For one moment, The thing wearing Evan looked uncertain. Then it smiled wider. From downstairs, the real Evan began screaming for his father.
Thomas stood between the two voices, one in the hallway, one below him. Both knew every memory. Both knew every promise. Both began crying at the same time. And Thomas finally understood the question was never which one was his son. The voice had already learned that. The question was which one he would choose to abandon.